Hi, I'm Paul Ribbons, and this is All About Property.
And I'm Tony Gedge, welcome.
So today we're going to be talking about when's the best time to put your house on the market and to move up onto the housing ladder. It's quite an interesting subject. Tony and I have spoke about it many, many times. When do you think is the best time for someone to sell their house?
That's a really, really good question. Really good question.
Yeah.
I've said for many, many years, and I'll quote it now. Really, there's a calendar on your wall in the house somewhere, or there's a calendar on your phone, or there's a calendar on your iPad, iMac, or something. But is there a date on the calendar that says put your house on the market? No, there's not. There's Christmas Day, there's Boxing Day, there's New Year's Day. But there's never.
Well, there is a restriction there, because would you open on a Sunday? Oh no, on a Christmas Day or Easter Sunday, or So
I've opened Easter Sunday. Sorry, but Christmas Day. So there's not a date on the calendar. But I think it depends on your circumstances, what's going on in your life, why you need to move, if you need to move, if you could look to extend, or what your circumstances are, what's going on. I think.
Yeah, I think there's two things with moving home. Once you've got one, is you've got the aspirational move, and you've got the necessity move.
Absolutely.
So you might be bursting at the seams because you've had lots of kids and the house doesn't meet your requirements anymore, and you need something bigger. As opposed to, and I think I don't know your experience from when I was an agent, most of the moves were aspirational. I want a bigger house. I want a better location, a better house. More aspirational than necessity.
There is that. The aspirational move is nice to move up market, but there's other situations involved as well. Equally, moving down market, once you get to a certain age, do you need the big house? That's not an aspirational, but you've reached your aspirations, and then you can release your equity and go off and enjoy your retirement. So that could be an aspiration coming into it in a different angle.
Yeah, sure. So let's look at it from a subjective point of view then. So someone's got it in their head, they're thinking of moving. What do you think they should be aware of?
Number one, what it's going to cost them.
Right, okay, fair enough. Yeah,
and I don't mean just estate agency fees. I mean the whole move. What it's going to cost. Because I think we've mentioned it before in our previous podcasts. Moving can be an expensive cost, but how much is it actually going to cost, and is it worth it?
I think it's because you've got obviously stamp duty. You're not a first-time buyer anymore. You've got legal fees, two lots of legal fees to sell and to purchase. You even have arrangement fees on your mortgages, your surveys, your moving costs, the actual removals. And also, if you're buying another house, does it need any work and stuff like that? So budgeting is very, very important. Is knowing how much it's going to cost you, and so let's assume someone's done. What sort of other costs do you think could be involved? So we've just mentioned quite a few. Estate agency fees, obviously, because they're not cheap, are they nowadays?
You pay for what you get.
And what other things we need to think about?
What within the moving costs? That. I think you've got a broad spectrum there of what people.
Also, I've noticed. I've noticed when I've because I search for houses all the time, not to move myself, because what I do for a living, and I do notice you get that highlighted stuff on Rightmove, and you get more quality shots. Is it more expensive to expose it in that way, or is it just a bog standard fee and you do everything like that?
It depends on agent for agent, I think. Again, there's packages all across the spectrum, so you might need to look at enhanced marketing packages.
Because I'm looking at that and thinking, well, depends on where you want when you put it on the market. I'm assuming, I don't want to just assume. So there is an assumption that most people would want to try and get the best price for their house. So enhanced marketing could well help that.
Absolutely.
Is there a bad time to put your house on the market?
No, I don't think so.
Right, okay.
And the reason why I say that is because, again, if the circumstances are right, put it on the market. Why delay? I mean, people over the years and years and years and years and years that I've been sitting in thousands of front rooms or wherever, a lot of people say springtime. because you got the roses round the door effect and everything else. But again, why would it be spring? So people have got that feel good factor. With the spring is we've had some nice humps spring within the weather, but it's not going to change the house and the.
No, I think the general census is that, it's, everything springs into life, and you've got possibly more buyers looking at that particular time, because there is also another avenue to that, which is there's going to be more sellers. So are you going to get a firmer price? But if you look at statistics from Rightmove and the indices, it would indicate that house prices do jump a little bit in that period where people put them on because there's more buyers around.
It could be, and that could be agent-led to gain the instruction. Whether that's a wise thing or not, I don't know. Again, that's a subjective conversation. But if there's more that comes to the market, and there's more buyers, you would naturally like to think that the price will increase slightly. But again, you've got the problem of overvaluing, and then you're not going to really be getting much interest. So
people are aware. You use the term, because we are going to do a one about jargon busting. Overvaluing is what in specifically, because some of our viewers may not understand what overvaluing means.
Well, shall I give them a little insight on? When I go to a home, I go with what I call comparables. So within a half a mile of the area, and it's not me who's setting the price; it's the market who's setting the price. And I've been guilty of it before. I'm not going to say I haven't, but to get that instruction, I don't do it now because of my own independent business. But it's you can go in and say, let's say a home is worth £400,000 based on the comparable evidence, and an agent will say, "I'll tell you what, we'll try 425." The seller sits up and goes, "Oh yeah, lovely."
Extra 25 grand.
Extra 25 grand. But is that the right advice? Who knows? They might be lucky and get it. Again, it's
so if they're lucky and get it, that would have been the right advice.
It's not overvaluing, but it's rolling.
It's worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. So it's finding that fine balance between which is too much, versus just a little bit higher where. And that reminds me actually when I first sold my very first flat in 1987. And the agents were coming round, and this shows you it's different but the same. The gaps are the same, percentage-wise. There was comparable evidence at the time to suggest £38,000 for the flat, and an agent came round and did exactly that. Went, look, let's try 42. So that's it's like saying 380 grand. Let's try 420. And that's a big spread, right?
Yeah.
And the first person in the door bought it. So
you rolled the dice.
Well, I didn't roll the dice. The guy said, "Look,
the agent rolled the dice."
I think we get that because he was reading the market. He could tell there was less properties around and there was more buyers. So it was a particularly, it was my flat, and I'm biased, but it was in good condition and it showed well. And I think that's the important thing. We'll touch on it in a minute about showing well. And so we found the situation where immediately the first person through the door.
But you hit the nail on the head, because we're mentioning about when is a good time, when's not a good time, and you mentioned there wasn't much on the market, there was a lot of buyers. So the agent, by the sounds of it, was switched on.
I can't even remember when I put it on the market. I don't even remember. And I can only go by my own situation. When I bought this house, I remember seeing it was being built, and in fact, it wasn't being built. It hadn't been released, and it got piqued my interest. And I know we moved in the May, and it took 9 months to purchase. So I must have seen it in the autumn the previous year, or something, or the late summer. And what drove me putting mine on was the fact that I'd found somewhere.
Yeah,
and it wouldn't have mattered if it was Christmas, whether it had been whichever time of year it was. I would have acted on it.
But that brings in another conversation, yeah? Do you put your house on the market before you found something, or do you put your house on the market and go and find something?
I think that depends where the market, whether it's strong enough. And it's funny because I was doing some research, and whereas there's more cash buyers coming into market today than there has been in the past, the ratio is quite high. I think it's third. It was a third cash buyers, and I think it's slightly higher now. But they reckon a lot of the downsizers, you mentioned downsizers earlier, are now finding something. I think this is only, obviously we've got to be careful because we don't know when someone's watching this, but the market was weak at the time, so they went and found somewhere, and that gave them the time to explore the selling of theirs, and it, you know, and they got a better. It was easier for them to move. Whereas in a really strong market, agents would have just tossed them aside and said, "No, forget it."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it brings into the question whereby, again, the amount of times that I've been in a situation where someone's phoned me up, I need to sell my house quickly. Why? Because I found something. I'm thinking, no, right. Because you just know it's going to be a bit more fraught from day one, and a bit more, you know, emotion coming out from day one.
Yeah, it's an emote business, yeah.
Absolutely. And I always, if I can give you any advice, put your house on the market and let nature take its course, because if you don't, it's probably going to cost you more money. Okay. And the reason why I say that is because, let's just say, again, a home's worth £400,000, and you go and find something, you know, with your wife and your family, and 9 times out of 10 you got the female dominating the move, saying, I want to move, I don't want to lose that house, because it becomes emotional. And I'm going to say to you, Paul, your home's worth 400, but if you need to sell this now quickly so you don't lose your purchase, we might have to take 5-10% off to get it sold quickly.
Okay,
you know.
Okay.
And
does
also,
does that depend on where you are in the market, if it's strong or weak, or is that general?
Good question. Until the market's tested, I don't know, but it again depends down to the comparables. And then if you turn that round, it's an estate agent's duty, because they get paid the fee to work for the seller. Yeah,
that's a good tip, by the way. They work for you.
Work for the seller, right? So if you're buying, I'll play devil's advocate through me, and I'm representing my seller, and you offer 385 on 400, and I know you want that house, and I know you've got a house to sell, that's not, or it's just going on the market, I'm going to say to you, Paul, you need to be paying £400,000 for this house, because you're not in a position to proceed. So you're taking money off yours, you're paying more money for that, and it's cost you more money, if that makes sense.
I think it really comes down to what the market's doing at that moment in time. Because I do remember when my daughter purchased her house, she found it, and we utilised her house because the market was really strong at the time. But when I say strong, instructions were thin on the ground, and I said to her, look, we'll utilise yours by dangling it in front of the agent and saying, we'll give you this house to sell.
That's smart.
So the agent was then, he pushed her offer and said, look, I've got someone for it. And literally straight away they'd sold it within a couple of hours, because there was nothing around at the time. But she was taking advantage of the strength in the marketplace. She had to pay a fair price for the one she purchased. I think she paid more than the ask. It was one of them sort of like guide prices.
Okay.
So she paid a fair price for that one, but she got good strong money for hers because there was about 6 people come round and they're all fighting for it. So I think it does depend when you're doing it. And that's a tip, by the way. If the market's strong, very strong, and there's not a lot on the market, you can utilise your house as a bargaining chip with the agent, because he's going to want to sell yours as well as, and this is the thing, and I think honesty is required here.
Yep.
As an ex-agent myself, if I could get 2 commissions out of one transaction, I'd take the 2 commissions. Whereas if you've got a proceedable buyer who's got nothing to sell, it's not in your interest to push that one. It's your interest to push the two comms, isn't it?
It's called chain building, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's being honest. I mean, that's you probably won't get that from many people.
No.
To say, oh, of course, I'm going to push the guy who's got a property to sell. It's human nature. But there is a point at which is best for the vendor. there is a point in that, because obviously when
Definitely.
the market's strong and you're confident that you're going to get something through quite quickly, it's not a problem. If the market's weaker, then it's a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, that's sound advice. Yeah, sound advice. Yeah,
So-
definitely.
So, do you think putting the property on the market during a time of festive periods or holiday periods is a wise move? Because I know you've had campaigns in the past where you've used seasonal stuff as promotions.
I'm out looking for stuff at the moment to obviously market. And, part of that is knocking on people's doors. And I'm speaking with them, and a lot of them are saying, I'm taking my home off the market until after Christmas.
So seasonal.
Seasonal,
yeah.
absolutely. That's after Christmas seasonal thing, because I don't want people around at Christmas. It's disruption. My house is not going to look the best because it's going to have Christmas decorations up.
You can understand that.
Totally. But my advice to that would be stop and think for a minute, yeah? Because the last 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 people have said it, yeah? Maybe. And again, if you all come back to the market in January and there's an avalanche of property, and the buyers come out a little bit later, what happens? Your prices driven down.
Could do, yeah, it could do. They don't necessarily do that.
But there's a big chance it could be, because we don't know. We all, as agents, have sat there in January. We've looked at our target for the year, and we've all got excited, thinking, "Oh, January is when it all kicks off." And you know as well as I do, sometimes people bounce it onto this what I spoke about earlier, the springtime. So that first quarter of the year could be a little bit slower than anticipated. We haven't got that crystal ball.
And I suppose that comes down to what we were talking about off camera, is putting your property on the market in the lesser times when there's lesser buyers but also lesser sellers. Someone might get attracted to your particular house because there's nothing else around. So that can effectively have the reverse effect.
It does, because again, I think we've worked, when we worked together, there was times when in the summer the market shrunk, those 6-week holiday period when people go away or do what they got to do. They're getting ready for maybe their children going to secondary school or starting school and everything else. They're going on holiday in bits and pieces, and the stuff that's been kicking around for a little bit, all of a sudden bang, selling. So again, seasonal times I think are good times personally. Because
and I think there was a period in the market, certainly in the period of the noughties and the early 20s. I think the seasonal times, because the market was strong, it didn't make any difference. I noticed it with auctions. It didn't matter if it was. It used to. I think it was more seasonal years ago. And as the market gets weaker, it becomes more seasonable. So we might be going into a weaker period. I don't know. But so we have to consider that as well. My concern, right, and we had this conversation earlier. When the market's weak and someone places their property on the market, who's driving that price? Is it the sellers? Is it the buyers? Or is it the agents?
What do you mean?
Well, if the market's weak and that house comes on the market, and the agents say it's not selling, and the buyers are sitting on the fence, vendor doesn't have to sell, would like to sell. What advice would you give them?
What if they don't have to sell? You've got to give them the professional advice. Everybody's got a circumstance why they're moving, as we spoke about earlier, but you have to give them the professional advice. And one of mine and your favourite phrases is property is like water. It always finds its own level.
Always does, yeah.
Always finds its own level. We don't set the price as an agent. We give them a recommendation, or I give them a recommendation, and it's down to the seller to take that advice. However, if you're transparent with them and say, well, I'll try your price, Paul, on the proviso, if after a period of time, we're going to have a sit down, a conversation, because I then believe the market comes into play in answer to your question. The market comes into play and says it's too much money, because again, if something is too cheap on the internet, on the property portals, the phone's going to be off the hooks. Yeah.
And inevitably you might well get more than the asking price or substantially higher.
Absolutely, which we've done many times. And we go back to what we've been through 2 years ago when the market came back in COVID. Prices went like that very, very quickly. But that again was the supply and demand scenario, you know. And I think you said it, you did say, watch when we come out of lockdown, the market is going to explode. And it did. But again, that was down to circumstances. Yeah. A lot of people made moves because they took advantage of the stamp duty up to £500,000 relief. Yeah. They took advantage of WFH, work from home, because we realised we could do it. So it depends on the circumstances at the time of the market.
I think we'll touch on that on another episode where I'll address what happened during that period and my take on it and the stats and the information and data that I got from it. So because there is certainly, I could predict what was going to go on only by virtue of the fact what had previously gone on, which we won't go into now because this is not about that at the moment. The point I was trying to make is that when the market is weak, and I've seen it, and we were both agents during the 90s. The prices were driven by the agent, not by the sellers or the buyers, because we were saying if you want to sell it, you're going to have to sell it at this price. Because there was so many of them, we had this conversation, one of the very first one. We had lots of repossessions. Between 1990 and 1995, there was 350,000 repossessions in the UK. They have to be sold.
Yep.
We didn't give them monkeys whether the lenders were going to take X or Y. We just wanted to sell houses. So as agents have to sell houses, they're the ones that are going to drive the price down, surely.
Maybe, but I'll put a different spin on that. If we go back to 2009, Halifax, I think it was Halifax Building Society, just dumped a load of stock in the auction. Do you remember?
2008 was, December 2008.
That's right, with no reserves. So that wasn't the agent setting the price.
It's the lender because they needed money, didn't they? Because they were running out of money, and we found out afterwards why. But again, they're effectively in possession, so they are the sellers at that time.
They're the sellers. So we've got an agent, we've got a seller, and the buyers, if it's a strong market, set the price.
And that's my point.
So,
because again, I think the agent, like the guy who sold my flat all them years ago, he drove the price by saying, "Let's try it higher," and I think that's my concern is that. If the market is very, very weak at the time of someone's placing it on the market, they have to consider what is the level they would take. Because and this is the way we did it. We had a business together many years ago. But the driver for that was, well, it doesn't matter what you take here, it's what you can buy there. So if you're selling your house and not purchasing on, it's more of a problem for you than it is if you're buying on. Because if you can buy pro rata, depending up or down,
percentage wise,
it makes no difference because if you're selling it cheaper and you're buying cheaper, there's no loss to you. But it's if you're just selling it and getting rid of it, then it could be a loss if you're not careful. So it depends if you have to sell. So I think the other thing I think when you're considering putting your property on the market, it does depend on where it is.
Yeah,
I think. And what type of unit it is. If it's very, very desirable, i.e., it's in a really good catchment area for schools. Or if it's a house that can be extended and there's it's got a garage on the side and there's lots of people after it. Does it matter?
Comes down to your own circumstances.
Yeah, because that's my point. There's always it doesn't matter whether the market's up, down, sideways. It doesn't matter what type of time of year it is. If it's the right house in the right road,
it will sell.
It will sell. It will attract buyers. Because of lack of stock coming up in that location. And I know that I hear of people around where I live. Waiting for something to come up, the right house in the right road. So if you've got the right house in the right road, and we've got to be careful here, everyone might think their house is in the right there's the right house in the right road. There are
Agreed,
certain
yeah.
roads where anything will sell with a front door and a roof. So
Yeah, yeah. It's down to your circumstances at the end of the day.
so what other tips can we give people? Because I think you touched on it earlier about whether someone moves or they spend money on the house and stay where they are. So
Again, that comes down to costs. It depends on whether you're moving up market, and have you got the potential to extend. If you've got the potential to extend, what's that going to cost you?
I mean, I'm making the assumption there as if someone's going to spend substantial money on the house extending, then their next move would have been up market as opposed to down market, because obviously you wouldn't expand your house if you wasn't looking at getting a bigger property so that is the proviso, that it's a move for a bigger property as opposed to anything else.
So if you're moving for a bigger property,
so you want a bigger property.
Yep.
So necessity is pushing you into, do you extend, can you convert a loft, can you full width extension? If you've got a garage on the side, space at the side, can you go sideways? What's the pros and cons of doing that as opposed to moving on and finding a house that's already done, that's already expanded?
Hassle,
right? Okay, yeah.
You know, you, if you're going to have an extension done or out sideways or full width across the back, you got grief. I've done it myself.
Yeah, you did, yeah. Maidstone Road.
I've done it myself. You got grief. You're living in dust and God knows how long for. That's if you obviously live there. If you stay there. I think there's, again, it's your own mindset. It's whether you want to extend your own and think, yeah, that's nice, done that, or you want to just convenience and go buy something that you can just put the removal van outside, put your furniture in and move on. So I think it's what you want out of the move. I think that's what it comes down to, and why are you extending it? As you say, if you're extending it, you need more room. You'd like to think you need more room. So it depends if you're going back to the right road. If you're in the right road and it's got the potential to extend it, you're going to extend it. You like to think.
Yeah. I think that could cut, because my daughter's in a situation where she's thinking of extending the house. When they got the cost, it shocked them.
Yep.
Because if you add the cost of the building up and the cost of the house, what they paid for it, it doesn't make it viable at the end of it, because all you're doing then is you're staying there because you like the house. Well, if you're looking at longer term, it's not so much of a problem, but there is a point at which you overdevelop a house, I think.
Price wise, yes, yeah.
In a short period.
In a short period, if you, we can't put a time scale on it when you're going to get your money back. But a lot of people say to me, if I do a loft conversion, on a terraced house, which is probably 40 grand these days.
That's more than that.
Yeah, 40,000. Let's just go upwards.
60, probably 60.
Yeah. Is that going to increase the value on a terraced home by 60,000 quid plus more for doing it? Probably not. Probably not. So then that's the time to move.
I think there was again, it comes down to where you're at and the property price, because there was a point in London where it become very trendy to do that.
Yeah.
Because values were jumping quickly. It wasn't that expensive to put a loft conversion and a full width extension on, so people were doing that. Then it become very expensive, and it's got to a stage where it's not as so outside of London. Depending on when you're watching this, it's probably more favourable to do that because of the fact that you're going to have that growth in perhaps values in the future. Because I think the other thing as well is if you love your house, if you really love your house, because it is an emotional purchase, and you don't want the hassle, then it's worth doing.
Yeah.
And I know people who have done substantial works to their property and stayed in the road they really love because they've got the ideal location. They just haven't got the ideal house. I always recommend when people do buy something, they always look ahead and think, okay, what can I do with that house if I had to stay or I wanted to stay?
Should I need to?
So if I buy a semi with a garage on the side, I've always got the option to go outwards. And you're not gonna, if you pick the right road, you're not gonna overdevelop it for the location.
Well, we'll go to an extreme, and the name will remain nameless. But you and I both know someone who was looking to buy something, couldn't find anything, flattened their existing house, and built. So you know,
I was thinking of that while I was talking about
we've got to just look at all the avenues of where you're buying and future on it.
I mean that's going to be in a far more affluent area, and that you know, we're talking millions rather than
we
hundreds
are
of thousands. So
but this is a wide audience.
Yeah.
You know?
So I think the average is not going to be at that level, but the principle's the same.
Yeah,
principle's
absolutely.
the same, which is I like the road I live in. I like the location, the schools, and that's the other thing as well, because if you're in a catchment area and you've got young kids, you want to keep them in that catchment area. You don't want to move out that catchment area. So it might be worth extending during that period while the kids are at school, only because of the fact you don't want to move out the catchment area, or because you're not going to be able to find something that easily in that catchment area. So we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else you can think of that you say, well, hang on, be careful doing this or doing that?
Just be careful if you are going to extend it that you don't run away with the costs, which you know we've covered. Be careful on that. Moving is a stressful time. Do you want to go through all that stress? But again, if you're extending it, it's a stressful time.
Yeah, there's the pros and cons of both, isn't there? And I think it's I think this is the difference. And I think for me, this sums it up, right? House moving. Not necessarily building, but house moving is one of the most stressful things that people comment on. So when we look at the 5 things that people get stressed about, moving home is one of them. And it's the uncertainty of not knowing what the eventual outcome will be that drives people nuts. So
Absolutely.
You put your house on the market, there's no guarantees you're going to find a buyer. There's no guarantees you're going to exchange at a certain time. And all this uncertainty, and people don't like uncertainty. Whereas if you're building, you know you can see the end. You know, as long as you've got a good build. I mean, there are horrendous stories. But ultimately there's going to be an end to it, and you're going to end up hopefully with a product that's lovely, done up nice, and it is exactly the way you want it. So it really does depend on that individual's personal
goal.
Yeah, and can they do they want the aggravation of moving? You know, because some people just can't handle that. You know, as we know.
Yeah.
You know, we get people screaming at us as agents, and you think, oh, you know. And we deal with it every day of the week, so to us it's not a problem. But
it's second nature. Absolutely. But again, it doesn't faze us because we know we're dealing with people's emotion, and that moving is an emotion.
It is, yeah.
You know?
Anything else we haven't covered?
Not unless you can think of anything. One last thing you could.
My tip to anyone selling a house is careful consideration. Is it right for you, not right for someone who's trying to sell your house, i.e. the agent? It's got to be right for you. And you'll feel right. You'll know, also be aware of market conditions, because if the noise is around, this is a bad time, it's, you know, this is house prices are falling or they're going up, whatever the case may be at the time when you decide to do it, is be aware of that, because I think it's important that you do your research, make sure. And there's macro climates, so when there's a national headline, it might be national, but their microclimates might be immune to what's going on in the bigger, wider world. So do your research, find out, see the competition. You can do more research today than you ever could in the past, and you can see how many houses are available on Rightmove, see what competition you've got, what similar type of houses, to get a feel whether it's worth putting it on. That's my advice.
Absolutely, yeah. Failing that, call an agent.
Well, thank you very much. Well done. And we'll see you next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about jargon busting.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about all the jargon that agents and solicitors talk about. And do you really understand it? And we'll just bust out all them jargons and give you some advice and tips on what they mean. Thank you very much.
Thank you.